Seems like there is some problem with this. So how many of you have gone through the last lecture that I shared with you? Can you please write in the chat? Okay. So 4 of you have gone through this. All right. So we'll just revise the last lecture. Does anyone know the solution to this problem? Okay, seems like it will allow now. So what are fluids? That's what we discussed. Okay, it seems still it has some problem. Okay. Okay, so what is a fluid? That's what we discussed in the last class. So all of you, can you write in one sentence what is a fluid in your chat box? Just one sentence. Can you all please write there in the chat box? What is a fluid? We discussed this last time. Maybe not the exact definition. You can write whatever you know. Okay. So something that deforms continuously, that's correct. Okay. So we talked about several examples in that lecture. Uh, we talked about different situations where it is important. So let me share the screen with you. Okay, I think it will not work. So yes, I hope you can see the screen. Um,
Yes, sir.
yeah, okay. So let me give you some examples of a fluid. So something that continuously deforms. But let's say you have a glass of water. Okay. And now this water liquid, is it deforming? It is of course not deforming. It is stationary, right? But so what do we need to modify in this definition of a fluid? So we said fluid is something that continuously deforms, but we need to add something there, right? Because in this case, it is not continuously deforming. Fluids don't always continuously deform or deform at all, as in this case. So the thing that we need to add there is that a fluid is something that continuously deforms under shear forces or shear stresses. Why shear? So if you consider this glass of water, there are forces acting on this liquid. But what is the nature of those forces? Let us see that. If there is gravity on this glass of water, if you consider just the water, this mg is acting. M is the mass of water contained in the glass. G is gravitational acceleration. So this much you already know. If you draw a free body diagram of this water, this mg can be assumed to be acting at the center of mass of this water. Now, because there is a force that this water is applying on the bottom of this container, there is a reaction force that is being applied by the container. From Newton's third law, we know this, that every action has an equal and opposite reaction between the two bodies. So if water is one body which is applying some force on the glass, glass is another body which is applying equal and opposite force on the water, on this water surface. So there is a force acting on the water surface, the bottom surface. Similarly, uh, by Pascal's law, which we will see later on, there is a pressure generated inside this liquid because of this reaction force by the container. And that pressure is uniform throughout if there is no external force. But if there is gravity, there will be a gradient of pressure. Gradient means there will be a variable pressure. It will be more at the bottom and less as you go up. Okay, that is pressure. It is linear in this case. You may know the formula also. Rho gh is the pressure variation with height. Okay, so now we know that there is a pressure being applied by the walls on this liquid. So there are of course forces acting on this liquid that we can see from here, but they are all normal forces. Okay, and if you consider air on the top, this air is also applying some atmospheric pressure on the upper surface of water. Okay, so the forces are acting on this mass of water from all sides, but they are all normal forces. What is a normal force and what is a shear force? To define these two, shear and normal forces, we need something called a surface, right, where the force is being applied. Generally, when we talk about forces in mechanics, we talk about yeah. So we talk about points on which forces are acting. There are no surfaces involved, right? You say this is F1, this is F2, this is F3, and so on. And net force F on this particle, which is a vector addition of all these. Vector addition means if F1 and F3 are equal and opposite, then it will cancel out, only F2 will remain. Right? You don't just add the magnitudes, you have to consider the directions of those forces as well. So you do the vector addition of all these forces, you get some F, final F. This is equal to mass of the particle times acceleration of the particle. Okay, this is Newton's second law of motion. But now, so what is normal and shear force here? Here it does not matter. There are no normal or shear forces, it is just force. But when you have a continuous thing, continuous medium, not a single particle, let's say you have a mass like this, you have surfaces defined here, you have a top surface, you have a bottom surface, right surface, left surface, like these. Now if a force is acting normal to this surface, then you say that it is a normal force. If the same magnitude is acting on the same surface but tangential to this surface, then you say that it is a shear force. So you have shear and normal. So here we are not talking about point particles. Here we are talking about finite sized mass of some material. Okay. Now, it may not always be normal or shear. You may have an arbitrarily shaped body and forces in some directions acting on it. Okay. Now you can always talk about net force acting on this body, but that will not tell you everything about it. To give you an example, let's say there are two blocks of wood, connected like this. You glue them using Fevicol or something, okay, some glue here at the junction. And let's say you take some other two blocks, okay, so that from outside the dimensions are same. This length is same as this length. The materials are exactly the same. You have just cut them differently, and now you glued them like this. Okay, all the other dimensions are same. Now I'm going to ask something. Let's say you apply the same amount of force in both of them. Um, this one is the first one, and this is the second block. Let's say you go on increasing this force. Which one do you think will break first? The first one or the second one? You can write your answer in the chat window. So we are assuming that glue is not very strong. Okay, we are pressing the two blocks towards each other. So you can see that the force is normal to the blocks at their ends. We want to know which one will break first. We are assuming that the glue strength is less than the block strength itself. Or you can also assume that it is not glue, it is just these two blocks. Okay, just loosely connected to one another, and we are applying these forces. Anybody else? Any other answers? Okay, as you know that in the first class, the slides that I shared, and the grading policy and all these things, there are marks for participation also. So all of you should participate. If you did not understand the question, I can repeat again. Was it clear to all of you? Okay. So now three of you said second one will break first. Yeah, it seems like that. And let us take a third example. Let's say the blocks are like this. They have been cut like this and glued. And let's say still the forces are acting on the same points. Now you know that they will just slip on one another, right? If you take this extreme angle of cut. So actually the surface matters, right? Within this block, at each and every point, the forces generated are same for all the three configurations, 1, 2, and 3. Forces generated are same, right? It is the same problem. But what we are considering is, what our interest is, the plane along which the glue is there, so that we would like to know what is the shear force along this plane. We know that if we just press these two blocks onto each other, if there is normal force, it is not going to break that easily. It may break, by the way, but we know that if it is a shear force acting on this plane, right, a shear force on this plane will cause it to break, because this glue is not so strong, so they will slip on each other. And in the third case, it is mostly shear. As you can see, there is almost no normal force, there is very little normal force acting on this plane. Okay. Otherwise, if you consider these points, this point, this point, and this point, these are the same points inside these solids. The forces acting there are same. Okay. F is same. If you want to find out F at the center, but the plane along which we want F, that is different in all three. Okay. So this is something new. The force matters, as well as the plane along which we want the force. That also matters. That makes a difference. We can see that. So let's say this is a point, and this is the force acting on this point. Now, which plane do you want? Uh, Along which plane do you want to calculate this force? That matters. So along this perpendicular plane, along this horizontal plane, or this plane. Okay. And we are talking about planes because we have a solid body enclosing this point, and there is continuous material here. Okay. If it was a point particle, we would not have talked about planes here. Is this clear up to this point? Is there any question? Okay. So now we have two things here. One is the direction of force. How many directions can there be? There can be three directions in three dimensions, three orthogonal directions. three directions x, y, z in Cartesian coordinates. Also, there are three more directions that are involved here, which are the plane directions. So the force matters as well as the plane along which it acts, that matters. So how do we give a direction to a plane? We will say that if it is a plane whose normal is in z direction, then we will call it a z direction plane. This plane has an orientation in z direction. Similarly, if there is a plane whose normal is in x direction or y direction, we call that as x plane or y plane. Okay. So the direction of force matters as well as direction of the plane matters. That's why for the same force, there can be shear force or normal force. So in two dimensions, if you see, there can be two plane directions, x and y, and there can be two force directions for each plane, this force and this force. So fx and fy. Similarly for this face also, fx, fy. So in all, there are four variables here. There is shear force and normal force on the x plane, and there are shear force and normal forces on the y plane. Okay. So these four are represented as a matrix, and instead of calling them F, now we'll give them a new name. We will call them tau. Okay. So that it is differentiated from a normal force. There is a difference. So now it has two directions. The first, we will write two subscripts here, like we write x here as the first subscript. We will write tau x, x. There are two directions. This means the force acting on the x plane in the x direction. So the plane has to be defined and the direction of the force has to be defined. First subscript is the plane on which the force is acting, and the second one is the direction. Okay. So tau xx, tau xy. What is tau xy here? On the x plane in the y direction. Then we have tau yx, which is on the y plane in x direction. And then we have tau yy. These four things. Tau yy is on the y plane in y direction. So just tell me again a question to all of you. Which ones are normal forces and which ones are shear forces out of these four? Can you write normal and shear? Use T for tau when you write here. So you can see this diagram and tell me which ones are normal forces, which ones are shear. Okay. So what about others? You can ask again to explain if it is not clear. So everyone has to write. I think because there are very few people in the class, so it will be better if everyone writes. Okay. Yeah, so that's correct. Yeah. So from this description, and by the way, these are known as stresses because we express them as force per unit area, where A is the area of the plane that we are talking about, X plane or Y plane, normal force or shear force. So both are expressed as force per unit area. So these tau are stresses in fluid mechanics or solid mechanics. Sometimes sigma is also used for stress. And you can see this is a tensor. You might have read about this. Scalars have magnitude but no direction. So a single number is sufficient to express scalars. Vectors, you have to specify a direction as well for them. So a magnitude and a direction, like force. And tensors, what are tensors? They have a magnitude and two directions. So now you can see how two directions are useful here. One direction is for the plane and the other direction is for the force itself. Where the force is acting, in what direction it is acting, and on which plane it is acting. So we need two directions to describe it in full. So that's why tensors are used here, and they are expressed as matrices, like we have done here. Tau xx, tau xy, tau ix, tau iy. So in 3 dimensions, you can imagine this will be xx, tau xy, tau xz, tau yx, tau yy, tau yz, tau zx. Zx means on the z plane in x direction. Tau zy, tau zz. So here again, this diagonal, if you see, these are all normal components of the stress and all the others are shear components. Okay. So now let's say this is a solid surface and you have some fluid here on the surface. And let's say you keep some solid object on top of it so that the fluid sticks to it. and then you start pulling it. Now what this solid object is doing is, it is applying a shear stress on the top layer of the liquid. Okay, it is applying the stress. Now if I tell you that this is the coordinate system, this is x and this is y, which component of stress is it applying? Which component is non-zero? Can you please tell from here? Tau xx, xy, yx or yy? Which component is non-zero here? So you can refer to the earlier picture. Which plane are we talking about here and which direction? Okay. So the question is, there is this liquid layer on a solid surface. Okay, this is liquid. And on top of this liquid, there is a solid block. Okay, it may be thermocol or something which can stay on top of this liquid, and then you are pulling it with a thread to the right. So you have to tell me which component of stress is non-zero in this liquid. On the upper layer of the liquid, you can tell. So yeah, it is tau yx. Yes, there is some question. Okay. Yeah. So it is tau yx. Y is the direction of the plane and x is the direction of the force. Correct. In such cases where there is a shear stress, the liquid will continue to deform, which is called flow. It will continue to flow. But if there are only normal stresses, this is a glass of water or a tub filled with water, and you have a piece of solid here, and you apply some force, normal to the liquid. Here, what component is there? It is tau yy. And there it was tau yx. So if you have tau yy alone, no tau xy or yx, then the fluid will remain stationary. It will not move. So you need a shear stress or shear force to determine if something is a fluid or not. And you don't need such a setup for determining this. It can be done in an easier way. What you need is, you need a blob of that material which you want to test whether it is a liquid or not, in general sense. I mean, nobody does it like this, but so what you do is, you take a wall, okay, and you put your liquid or whatever it is blob on this wall. You know that there will be mg acting at the center of mass, and if it sticks to a wall, it has that sticky nature, then there will be a force applied by the wall on this liquid or this material. You can call it F friction or F. You can see that there is a shear that has been generated here because the two forces are not aligned with each other. It is shearing the fluid or the material. So if this is X and the vertical direction is Y, the force is along Y. Okay. if you consider a plane like this, then on this plane, what force is acting? What component of stress is acting? So the plane is in x direction and the force is in the y direction, tau xy. So if you want to test if something is a fluid or not, you just take it and throw it on a wall, paste it on a wall. If it starts to go down, if it starts to flow down, that means it is a liquid, it is a fluid. Otherwise, it is behaving like a solid. Okay. Is there any question? Okay. Now, yeah. I don't want to go into more details of this in today's class. Let us discuss some applications of fluid flows, which we discussed in the last lecture, which is uploaded, the link that you have. There you have internal combustion engines. How many of you know how an engine works? Engine of a car or a bike works. You can raise your hands. So you have to click the this raise hand button. Okay, how many of you do not know how it works? Okay. So all of you know what an engine does. Of course, it takes fuel. This is engine and gives you work in the form of rotation of wheel, right? So the wheel rotates. That is the output of the engine, and input is fuel. And how it does that? So it burns the fuel. How burning something rotates something else? Okay, there has to be some kind of machine to do that. So what it does is it has a cylinder. Okay, I'm showing the cross sectional view, some sketch of that. It has an inlet port here from which the fuel comes in. It is actually fuel plus air, and there is a piston. Okay, so what happens is this piston is made to go up and down in a linear motion. And there is a mechanism here. Okay, you can imagine these to be the links. This is the first link and this is the second link. And you can imagine that when it goes down, the piston goes down, this link will also come down. Okay, something like this, and it rotates. Okay, then it will come up again, like this. So it goes, the piston goes up and down, and this thing here rotates because of that. That is conversion from linear motion to rotational motion. And how the piston goes up and down? So what happens is, when the piston goes up, the fuel plus air mixture is already present in the cylinder. It is sealed. The inlet port is shut off. It is closed by a valve. There is an outlet valve also, which is also closed even before that. And there is a spark plug here, okay, which ignites it. It ignites the mixture, which creates an explosion. It cannot be called burning because it is very fast. It is like an explosion. So that explosion throws the piston downwards. And as it comes down, it rotates this crankshaft, it is called. And that crankshaft again pushes it up. Okay, as you can see, after it rotates, it again pushes the piston up. And when the piston is going up, now there are only burnt gases inside, burnt fuel. There is no energy in that fuel now. There is, but it cannot be utilized. Efficiency is very low, only about 40%, something like 40 or 45. And now in this upward motion, the inlet valve is again closed. It is closed even before that. And now the outlet valve is opened. So these gases go out from this outlet valve, which are burnt gases. That is the smoke you get out from the exhaust pipe. Okay. And again, this cycle is continued. The outlet valve is closed, inlet valve is opened, some fuel comes in, inlet valve is closed. When the piston reaches up, the mixture is ignited by this spark plug. The explosion throws it down. Okay, so all of this is repeated. This is a cycle, and it happens very fast. If you have seen this RPM meter on a bike or car, how many of you have seen this? Can you raise your hands? This RPM meter. In some bikes or cars, it is there. Many of them don't have. Okay. So it shows you the RPM. So it is numbered as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And on the side, it is written times 1000 in the meter. It means 2000 RPM, 3000 RPM. RPM means rounds per minute. And that is not for the tire, of course. It is not rotating at 2000 rounds per minute. This is for the engine, the crankshaft. So the crankshaft is rotating 2000 rounds per minute, which you can convert to seconds. How many rounds per second? This is just divide by 60. So there are too many rounds per second. You can see that. So in 1 second, so many times this piston goes up and down. So you need some control mechanism which opens and closes valves in perfect timing. Okay, all that is there. The mechanism which does that, and you need a mechanism to inject the fuel when the valve is open, and so on. There are animations on the internet. So this is called an internal combustion engine. The combustion takes place internally inside a cylinder. There are external combustion engines also that are not common, very common nowadays, where you burn the fuel outside, okay, and use it to boil steam, and then steam engine works. so on. Okay. So this is an application of fluid flows. What is the fluid here? It is the gas, which is compressing, expanding. The compressed gas expands, which provides this force or energy to the piston. Okay. And that is what runs the car or bike. Okay. So we will stop here. If there are any questions, you can ask. In the next class, we'll go more into the details of fluids, classification of fluids, and so on. Any questions? Okay. So if not, we'll end here. Thank you.